I'd like to welcome you to meeting number 36, the House of Commons Standing Committee on Government Operations and Estimates. The committee is meeting today and it will be 5:44 Ottawa time, today to hear witnesses as part of its study of businesses owned by underrepresented groups. We do have the full 2 hours to do the meeting, and we look forward to hearing from our witnesses. I'd like to take this opportunity to remind all participants to this meeting that screenshots or taking photos of your screen is not permitted. To ensure an orderly meeting, I would like to outline a few rules to follow. Interpretation in this video conference will work very much like in a regular committee meeting. You have the choice at the bottom of your screen to either floor, English, or French. Before speaking, please wait until I recognize you by name. When you're ready to speak, you can click on the microphone icon to activate your mic. When you are not speaking, your mic should be on mute. To raise a point of order during the meeting, committee members should ensure their microphone is unmuted and say point of order to get the chair's attention. The clerk and the analysts are participating in the meeting virtually today. If you need to speak with them during the meeting, please email them through the committee email address, and the clerk can also be reached on his mobile phone. For those people who are participating in the committee room, please note that masks are required for all staff at all times. MPs may remove their masks only when they are seated. I will now invite the representatives of Axis Edmonton Aboriginal Business and Professional Association to make their presentation. Mr. Sinclair or Mr. Suter?
Audio?
Mr. Sinclair, we can't hear you.
To a different audio set here, so you'll
I believe, Mr. Chair, Mr. Sinclair is going to try a different audio setting.
Okay, thank you. In here. What?
I apologize, I've got no audio.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. Perhaps with your discretion, we could move to another witness and then come back to Mr. Sinclair.
Certainly, I think that might be Mr. Sinclair. Well, we'll do is while you're working on that, we will go to our second group and the Canadian Council for Aboriginal Business. If they would go first, we'd appreciate that. And as Mr. Sinclair works out the details of his audio system. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Philip Descharmes. As Director of Innovation and Entrepreneurship of the Canadian Council for Aboriginal Business, I want to thank you, Mr. Chair, and all distinguished members of this committee for the opportunity to provide you with my testimony and to answer your questions. Speaking to you from my home office, I acknowledge the land as the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and now home to many other First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. I am Métis with all eight of my great-grandparents attached to Métis scrip, and am a citizen of the Manitoba Métis Federation. From the beginning of the pandemic, the federal government put out calls to procure personal protective equipment from businesses. As our president and CEO, Ms. Tabitha Bull, has noted during her appearances at House and Senate committees over the last year, numerous Indigenous businesses were prepared and continue to be prepared to provide PPE to meet Canada's medical needs. Lists of such Indigenous businesses were provided to many federal departments as early as March of 2020, but only a small fraction of the over $6 billion of federal procurement contracts for PPE was awarded to Indigenous businesses. Over the course of the pandemic, there were 2 RFPs which sole sourced from Indigenous businesses. In a press release of September 21st, 2020, PSPC noted that 7 Indigenous companies were awarded contracts for non-medical face masks in one such RFP for a total of approximately $2.5 million, with an unprecedented 233 Indigenous-led businesses responding. PSPC also reported that approximately $68.5 million in contracts had been awarded to self-identified Indigenous businesses for requirements related to COVID-19. We understand through discussions with PSPC and through our own combing of publicly available data, this value is now slightly higher. However, we continue to be unable to obtain confirmation of the total spend from the Indigenous businesses on PPE. To remedy this information gap, as suggested by Ms. Bull on February 22nd, I would also propose this committee consider measures that would mandate government departments and agencies to report on their purchases from Indigenous businesses as a part of their submissions to the main estimates and the supplementary estimates. Simply put, we cannot evaluate and improve upon what we do not measure and report. Through Supply Change, CCAB's trademarked Indigenous procurement strategy, we have had continuous dialogue with Indigenous businesses as it pertains to federal procurement. What we have learned is that Indigenous businesses are very keen on pursuing opportunities, but have had numerous challenges, including identifying those opportunities. With this in mind, we post all federal set-aside RFPs within our own Aboriginal procurement marketplace. Other challenges that Indigenous businesses have identified to us include the complexity of the RFP. A $100,000 bid requires almost the same amount of time and resources to respond to as a $10 million bid. In many bids, previous work history with federal government is required, and without that, the bid is non-compliant, making it difficult to garner new Indigenous suppliers. Another key challenge we have heard is there is no feedback on why a bid was unsuccessful. One of our Indigenous business members responded to 32 federal RFPs without success, but without any feedback, they did not know where they needed to improve their bid. That being said, I want to note that throughout my extensive career working with Indigenous businesses and federal procurement, I can say that I've never had the opportunity of collaborating as closely with various federal departments, and in particular with PSPC through OSME as I have in the last year. Together with the various OSME regions, we have held numerous information webinars for Indigenous businesses and will continue to do so. This collaboration helps Indigenous businesses navigate the complexities of responding to federal bids and is one of the ways we continue to work with the federal government to support the mandate of achieving a minimum 5% Indigenous procurement target. Additionally, other measures to increase federal procurement from Indigenous businesses should include ensuring that Indigenous procurement targets appear in every departmental plan and every executive's professional management plan to ensure administrative leadership and fulfillment of the government's procurement targets for Indigenous businesses. This change could be made administratively without the need for legislation through an amendment to the government's directive on performance management. CCAB is committed to continuing to work in collaboration with the governments, other members, and partners to help rebuild and strengthen the path towards reconciliation and a healthy and prosperous Canada. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Descharmes. Mr. Sinclair, are you comfortable at this point in time?
I am back, and
that sounds much better. That sounds much better.
I do apologize. These things do happen, as I understand. So if I can go now, Mr. Chairman. So good afternoon, Mr. Chair and committee members. Firstly, thank you very much for the opportunity to address the committee today. My name is Rocky Sinclair, and I'm the CEO of the Alberta Indian Investment Corporation, and we're an Aboriginal financial institution located in Enoch Cree Nation. My comments today, however, will be in my capacity as president of AXIS, which is an Indigenous business and professional association formed in 2013, and we're located in Edmonton. So although we have not engaged in a formal survey or study related to federal procurement opportunities for Indigenous peoples in Edmonton, we are confident that there are common concerns with the procurement strategy that are applicable to the majority of Indigenous businesses, regardless of where they are located. There are processes that can be overly complicated and difficult to navigate, that's known. Also, the reach of the procurement opportunities may not be getting to the Indigenous businesses. There are limitations there, certainly. There are also concerns about some of the qualifying criteria that might be too limiting or stringent. That is also known. So for urban Indigenous businesses, there are unique challenges. And given they are typically standalone in nature and do not have a support system that may be available in other communities, many Indigenous businesses in urban settings typically are interspersed throughout the city and are not concentrated in one area. Therefore do not have peer support readily available. Also, many of those businesses are owner-operator businesses, and they are proprietors. Their proprietors are very hands-on and do not have the resources to navigate through complex program portals looking for opportunities. It is our view that if proactive strategies are introduced, along with mandated targets and appropriate metrics, we will see improvements in the uptake of Indigenous businesses in securing opportunities with the federal government, and we would recommend that consideration. If there are not significant and fundamental changes to the Indigenous procurement strategy, the issues that Indigenous businesses have had with the strategy since 1996 will continue. I have a colleague that's with me, and she will provide further comments, and she will take up the balance of my time. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Rocky. I believe that's my cue now to speak. Good afternoon, and thank you very much for the invitation to be part of this session today. My name is Marnie Suter, and I'm speaking to you today from Musqueam, which is Edmonton in Alberta, the heart of Treaty 6 territory and Region 4 Métis. I am a director of AXIS, and I am also the principal partner of an Indigenous-owned consulting practice known as InSync Consulting. Over the past 18 years, the majority of my focus has been on capacity building within Indigenous communities, businesses, and entrepreneurial endeavors. I have witnessed many entrepreneurs and department managers struggle with what I refer to as the end-to-end procurement process, whether that be at the front end when they're searching and identifying an opportunity to respond to, or whether that's through the pre-qualification process, or whether that is in the contract and reporting management that is part of the project compliance. It is a very tedious and onerous process, and it requires an infrastructure to support and an expertise to complete the core elements of procurement. In many cases, entrepreneurs find that the return on their investment of time and resources just simply doesn't add up. That said, I do believe that there are ways to streamline the process and to refine the policies and procedures to enable Indigenous businesses to fully and meaningfully participate in the federal procurement process. I want to thank you for allowing me to share these few thoughts, and I look forward to participating as the session unfolds. Thank you.
Thank you, and we appreciate your comments and look forward to questions. And finally, now we will start with the National Aboriginal Capital Corporations Association.
Thank you. My name is Shannon Mitatawaban. I'm the CEO of the National Aboriginal Capital Corporations Association, or NACA. I'm also a member of the Fort Albany First Nations of the OGGO Nation. Thank you for the invitation to speak to your committee study on federal procurement before and after COVID-19 pandemic. Before I begin, I would like to acknowledge that I am taking this call. Hello?
Just excuse me a minute. Ms. Vignola, is there a translation issue? Is that correct?
I'm really sorry, but the sound from Mr. Metatwaban is too poor. The interpreter cannot interpret. So I don't know if his microphone has been properly selected on his computer, but I was getting kind of a double echo myself listening to him.
Yeah, Mr.
I think Mr. Matawaban has found out what the issue might have been, and he will try that and see if that makes a difference. Go right ahead. If you want to start again.
I just want to acknowledge that I'm taking this call on the Mi'kmaq territory of beautiful PEI. NACA represents a national network of 59 Indigenous-led institutions. Our members work with First Nations, Métis, and Inuit businesses on a daily basis. NACA is also one of 6 organizations on a National Indigenous Procurement Working Group formed in July 2020. Canada created our working group to coordinate advice on policy and legislative frameworks needed to achieve a minimum target of 5% Indigenous procurement government-wide. In these difficult times, procuring goods and services from Indigenous businesses provides one concrete means to further economic and social reconciliation. And yet, over the past decades, opportunities for Indigenous procurement seems to have remained unchanged. As far as we know, the high point was in 2014 with 227 million in Indigenous set-asides, only 0.8% of total federal procurement that year. I say as far as we know, because one issue our group has identified is the lack of consistent, accessible data across federal departments. Why do the opportunities remain so few, even with the 5% target upheld throughout the pandemic? Our research has revealed several factors. The first issue is government policy and process. The benefits of Indigenous procurement are not widely appreciated across government, and the current policy directs little spending to Indigenous suppliers. The process itself is decentralized. This limits implementation of the 5% target to only a handful of departments. Added to this, departments are not required to report publicly on the targets, and there are no consequences for failing to meet them. There are few incentives to change, and so things remain the same. A second barrier rests with the capacity of the Indigenous business to bid on government contracts. Many find the process difficult to navigate. Many are not registered with the Aboriginal Business Directory, now managed by the government. Also designed and managed by the government are the outreach, strategy, training, and tools, which do not meet the needs of our businesses. A third barrier may be criteria defining an Indigenous business. The current criteria requires 51% Indigenous ownership and control and 33% of employees to be Indigenous. Taken together, these two requirements are hard to achieve, and some Indigenous businesses may be excluded. So what is to be done? Our working group has identified 4 solutions. First and above all, increase Indigenous access depends on mandated government-wide targets. Setting a target of 5% across departments was a crucial first step, and yet it will exist only on paper without introducing the monitoring and support needed. Second, monitoring is key. Canada needs to improve its data collection, reporting, and governance of the process to drive results. The federal government needs to increase its transparency government-wide so that we have an accurate portrait and Indigenous oversight. Third, meeting the target will require streamlining and demystifying the procurement process to make it more accessible. The process will need to address specific barriers that prevent our businesses from participating, including any introduced by the definition of an Indigenous business. Fourth, the Indigenous institution to lead in identifying, advancing, and delivering tools and services to support implementation of the target. Our business owners need an Indigenous-led center they can trust to develop a comprehensive, up-to-date directory using definition that works for them as well. These are the measures our group has identified and is now bringing forward a robust research program to support them. We are also coordinating with our 3 government counterparts tasked with developing a new policy framework, ISC, PSPC, and Treasury Department. Clearly, there is much to be done and to achieve the targets, and much that can be done. As the experience of jurisdictions like Australia and Saskatchewan have shown us, with the right monitoring and will and supports, we could not only meet our 5% target, but we can increase it by 3 to 4-fold. In the COVID crisis and beyond, addressing this aspect of reconciliation is straightforward. Meeting the 5% target will depend on clear federal direction, incentives throughout the bureaucracy, and an Indigenous lead to work with and register our business owners. In a fairly short time, we could move this target from aspirational to reality, promoting our shared prosperity. Ichimiigwech.
Thank you, Mr. Matawaban, and thank you all 3 of you for your presentations. We'll now go into our questions and answers, and we'll start with our first round, and we'll start with 6 minutes from Mr. McCauley.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Our witnesses, first of all, thank you for your patience and sticking with this. I know staring at a blank Zoom screen for 2 hours is probably not the highlight of your day, so thanks for that. I want to thank everyone for the opening statements. It pains me that we have to invite witnesses here today for this, because we went through this almost identical process 3.5 years ago in the last Parliament, where we heard different people from the Indigenous community say basically the exact same things we're hearing today, where we have big promises, no follow through, and on and on and on. And so I'm glad you were able to come and reinforce what we've heard before. One of the things that's always stunned me about procurement from the Indigenous community is when we had the last set of committee meetings on this, we heard from Indigenous that from the government side, they were getting no help, no real results. And then we heard witnesses say where they were getting great help from the energy industry, especially in Alberta. And then when we brought the procurement bureaucrats in, they almost threw their shoulders out, patting themselves on their back so hard. So there's a complete disconnect between what you're telling us and what the bureaucrats will end up telling us. One of the things I'm really glad you brought up was the part about tracking and setting goals. We've seen procurement for, I think, 3 straight years now put to be decided as their goal for achieving the set-asides. And I think it is important for accountability and achieving results. We do have these things. I want to start just quickly for everyone there. Mr., and I'm sorry, I'm going to mispronounce your name here, Matawaban. You mentioned about how we're qualifying Indigenous businesses, and it's always a question is, are we better off like a contract going to a non-Indigenous owned company, but it employs a very large amount of Indigenous people, or is it to set aside for an Indigenous owned, but does not perhaps employ a large amount of Indigenous? What delivers the best results for the community, and where do you see the balance between that?
Well, I think a big problem with the procurement over the past 25 years is only $1.6 billion has been allocated to all Indigenous procurement opportunities.
Agreed.
And that's only 0.8% of probably all opportunities. We need to make wholesale changes. Australia has shown that they had targets and they increased it by 4-fold. Saskatchewan has done it, but it's only because there's a will. If there's a will, then there's a way. The only way you're going to make a difference is for those frontline managers to be able to select an Indigenous person. If there's hard targets and consequences for not meeting those targets, it'll happen. Now, what you're talking about is how can we find the right mix on the type of business? And I think that what Australia has shown us is if there is an opportunity, Indigenous people will respond with the right businesses, with the right employee breakdown, and invest in the assets. We did this 20 years ago. They invested a lot, and nothing resulted from it. So a lot of them just stuck to mainstream. So I'm looking for a real change.
Okay. Mr. Ducharme, do you have a comment on that? Or Mr. Sinclair and Ms. Suter?
I do believe I do agree with what Shannon had said. I mean, we look at the businesses as well, and we are trying to ensure that the businesses are going to be the 51% owned and controlled. I think what has been an issue in the past was the government told us what is an Indigenous business. They said to qualify as an Indigenous business, they do have that extra requirement. To my knowledge, any of the other programming that the federal government has regarding social procurement, it's only the ownership and control. There is no requirement to have your workforce be the stakeholder group that is being recognized. And I do think that Indigenous businesses, there is the research that does show that we do hire our own people. We do increase the capacity within our communities as well by hiring. So I think that's what needs to be done. It also does need to have the targets set, and there does have to be some teeth to it. A mandate is great, but unless it's incentivized, it's going to be a hard sell to happen.
Yeah. Ms. Suter?
And Ms. Suter, as just Ms. Sinclair, we're still, technicians are working with him for correcting it. So if Ms. Suter would be able to answer, that would be best way.
Yes, thank you. I'm actually working at the civic level with the City of Edmonton on their procurement strategy. And so it's interesting, some of the conversation that's come thus far. But if we think about ownership at 51%, I've worked with Indigenous businesses that are 100% Indigenously owned. But in the background, there are blind trust agreements, et cetera, that actually transfer the actual operations of the business to non-Indigenous. So just having that criteria of ownership does also create some other nuances. And then I've seen the other side where we've had a business that is 100% Indigenous owned, but and operated, but cannot meet the requirement for the employee base. So the example would be in the engineering or architectural world. Here in Edmonton, we do have a very reputable business. They are capable and qualified, but they could never meet the 33%, or pardon me, the 33% threshold because they're just not able to find the skill set within the Indigenous community to meet that. So there's challenges on both sides.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Suter, and thank you, Mr. McCauley.
Thank you.
We'll now go to Mr. Weiler for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'd also like to thank our witnesses for their patience in joining our committee meeting tonight. And maybe I should start by recognizing that I'm streaming from my home on the traditional unceded territory of Coast Salish peoples, including the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam nations. One of the questions, or what came up in the opening comments for everybody, was one of the big barriers to having increased Indigenous involvement in government procurement was the complexity of the RFP process. And Mr. Ducharme mentioned a couple of things, the challenges with previous work history of the government and lack of feedback. But maybe first with Mr. Ducharme, I was hoping you could explain a little bit on your thoughts about how the RFP process itself could be simplified and how that might be able to increase Indigenous procurement.
Thank you. I think if you looked at the RFPs and some of them, if you sort of unbundled them, or if you didn't have so many criteria that's in it, it's almost set up right now that all the criteria, the mandatory criteria in these RFPs is almost like a weed out mechanism. And it's really, that's where a lot of our businesses struggle with, especially with the previous platform, the buy and sell and the e-post that the federal government was using. There would be one little thing that would be missed. And because of that, they're non-compliant. Their bids are not even being looked at. So I think making not as many mandatory requirements, it almost seems like the requirements, as I said earlier, they are there to set us up for failure. My understanding is with the new procurement platform that the federal government is going to, that it is going to make it a little bit easier so that people aren't going to be losing out by not having a document that's uploaded. And again, I think by simplifying the contracts, we had one supplier that said he spent $10,000 to actually respond to the bid because there was so much. It was a technical RFP, but there's no reason why something that's worth 10 million is going to have to require the same amount of work as a 10 or $100,000 RFP.
Thank you for that, Mr. Ducharme. I'd like to ask the same question to Ms. Suter as well as Mr. Metawaban.
Thank you. My comments would be somewhat similar. I think it's important to scale the RFP to the work that's actually being required. So to actually take a look within, understand the risk, the scope, the dollar value, and then adjust the RFP accordingly. You know, the requirement to hold, let's say, $5 million worth of insurance, is that really practical for someone that's bidding on a $150,000 contract? Those types of things would be helpful.
I'd just like to add that if we viewed it as an investment, investing in Indigenous businesses, the social impacts for an Indigenous-owned business in the community is 72% increased in life satisfaction, 52% in mental health indicators, and 19% increase in health indicators. There's actual cost savings there. And there's also ancillary benefits to other community members with that business. Now, there's community-owned businesses that have bid on contracts within their own community and have been weeded out because of the complexity of the bidding process. There needs to be a full change on how this is set up to ensure that that community-owned business is front of the line, because they're going to be hiring their community members. The benefits are going to remain in that community. But right now, the system is set up to fail, as Philip has pointed out. We need to remove those barriers, just like we have so many other barriers in front of us, and we're going to see a lot more impact.
Definitely. Well, if you could, we would appreciate it if you could share the report that has those statistics, so we can share that with the committee. But a number of things that came up in this meeting today was some of the other jurisdictions that have set targets, increased targets with enforcement measures to ensure those are met, have been able to meet them. And I'm curious if you could comment on, in addition to those targets, what were the actual changes that took place within government procurement to facilitate that additional procurement, in addition to just the targets, but what actual changes perhaps in the process took place that led to that? And maybe first, Mr. Metawaban, please.
Okay, I'm just going to refer to something I have in front of me here. So in 2019 and 2020, Australian Indigenous procurement outcomes had a target of 195 million. The results were 854 million. The results exceeded target by about 4.3. Saskatchewan Power in 2019 had a target of 3.5%. Results are 8.6. So there's a large fold increase in the targets, but this is because they're actually implementing procurement and caring about it. I think that in maybe Rocky can speak to this, but Suncor's had the longest procurement process with some of the tribes in Alberta, and that's kind of where corporations have taken the lead to actually implement processes through impact benefit agreements that have hard targets and consequences for not meeting them. So you lose your social license to operate. We almost need to get into that kind of territory if we really want procurement to make an impact.
Thank you. And we will now go to Ms. Vignola for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Metawaban, Ms. Suter, Mr. Sinclair, and Mr. Ducharme for your presence here today. It's greatly appreciated. Your patience is as well. It's hugely appreciated. You talked about government initiatives that have been put in place since 1996, and you also spoke about the difficulty sometimes of finding employees who have the necessary skills within the community. And that reminded me that now, some 17 years ago, actually, I participated in a program for young Indigenous children. It was called E-Spirit, and it was an entrepreneurship contest. And it was indeed to give kids the taste for school, the desire to go. And as far as I know, the program doesn't exist anymore. But to improve qualifications, what would be initiatives that would work? Because now we've seen many that haven't worked. So what would be initiatives that would work and that would allow Indigenous businesses to find qualified staff within their communities? Mr. Metatawabin?
Oh, I like this question. This is so important because when you think about creating an entrepreneur, you have to start at the very beginning. So this starts with the children. And I was just speaking with Chris Gugu today from Ulnaweg, and they have a whole pathway of learning where they enter the schools to begin introducing STEM and introducing skills and innovations so that the student, when they get to the time of selecting a career, is either going to go to school or they're going to start a business. They already have entrepreneurship and a business in their vocabulary, and that's so important. The AFI network, they work with businesses every day, so they're always developing capacity programs and providing the training directly to the entrepreneur. But support for the Indigenous Business Development Network has decreased by 70% in the past 20 years. So Rocky, who has a certain number of business officers, has reduced his numbers because the support that he receives is not there anymore. We need to increase and provide some enablers, some stimulus to ensure that we can provide the skills to everybody that wants to start a business. Thank you.
Okay. Merci.
Thank you. What I'm hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Metatawabin, but what I'm hearing is that not only are the initiatives a failure, but also there has been funding taken away that has resulted in making the situation even worse. Is that correct?
Well, if we take it back a little bit further, a number of barriers were created for Indigenous people, placed in reserves, so away from the market. We have legislation in the Indian Act which prevents us from taking our house as security. So we don't have any wealth generation within our community. So equity is a problem. Skilling in the community, infrastructure, water, people are surviving on a day-to-day. Providing skilling so that people can consider entrepreneurship as an option is a huge win. And if we can do that and have government that is willing to say that Indigenous people matter, this is low-hanging fruit that we can provide reconciliation by providing government opportunities that are already there. We just have to enable the Indigenous business to say that this is a real opportunity and it's going to happen this time. Thank you.
La prochaine question.
The next question I would ask each of you to answer in turn. So for me, independence for First Nations is extremely important, and it has to be at the forefront. The government seems to finally be understanding that these initiatives have to be set up in cooperation and collaboration with First Nations and not imposed on them. You are capable, you have experience, you have a culture that needs to be valued. So is it possible that one of the reasons that it might explain the low rate of contracts given to Indigenous businesses might be not only because of that, but in particular because First Nations have been little involved in the consultation process and the changes that were made or should be made?
If I could go ahead, I think this sort of ties back to what you said as well. One of the things that we need to ensure that the federal government works with Indigenous businesses well before an RFP is posted. Once an RFP is posted, it's too late for our businesses to scale up, to go out and resource the employees that they need. I do know that even within the center block in Ottawa, there's going to be a lot of construction that's going to be going on in the next 20 to 30 years. And I think what we're working with as well with the federal government and OSME is to try and ensure that these businesses realize what the opportunities are that are coming up. And then we can work with the asset holders and say, these are the types of trades, these are the types of opportunities that are going to be required by our Indigenous businesses to be able to fulfill these contracts, so that when the actual RFP is posted, we're able to apply to it, and we're capable of responding to those RFPs fully without having to try and scramble to say that we don't have the needs. And I think that's one of the best things that needs to happen, is more engagement prior to the actual RFP coming out.
And thank you, Mr. Ducharme. And if the other witnesses would like to respond to that question, if they could maybe put that in writing, if they can think of that and respond. Unfortunately, due to time, unless Ms. Vignola wants to bring it up again when she has the next opportunity to ask the question. We'll now go to Mr. Green for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and to all the witnesses. I'm going to start by doing something I don't normally do, and that's just noting in a very nonpartisan way that I believe in my heart that all the members of this committee want to see increased procurement coming through to the Indigenous communities. They want to see the programs that are in place work. I believe that to be true on the opposition side and on the government side. And I would also note that nobody understands the challenges that are faced from First Nations, Métis, and Inuit communities better than those of them who are actually experiencing it. So your testimony today, in a very short period of time, notwithstanding the weight that you had, has already laid out some really compelling and very obvious next steps for this government to take. I want to just note that I have a concern around timing in terms of what may or may not happen out of this study, in terms of us being able to report back and have recommendations from the study. I'm unclear about whether that's going to happen in this session or next, but I do want the opportunity to get on the record a few of the points that have been made, reiterated, because unfortunately I won't be able to pass it as a motion at this point. I don't think it would be time effective. But Mr. Ducharme, you brought out, I think, what was for me one of the most compelling points, which was if it doesn't get measured, it doesn't get done. And I've been pushing the Auditor General to include in all of their audits and studies a very similar framework that you had identified in terms of having open and transparent reporting on the deliverables and the outcomes within the main estimates. I think you also touched on departmental plans, and you also talked on, I believe, directive on performance management. Could you please restate from your notes, to go back into the Hansard for people who are watching, hopefully the senior members or PSs that are here that could take this back and maybe move on this without us having to do anything formally. Can you restate what that ask was with detail? It is on mute.
Sorry about that. Okay, I'll just get onto my notes here. So I think one of the areas we talked about was the directive on performance management. I mean, it would be as simple as changing section 4.1.2 and including Indigenous procurement in there. Right now it says determining in consultation with the deputy head the departmental criteria for talent management plans. If we were to including Indigenous procurement targets in accordance with the appendix to this directive, that would make a big difference. Also on the standard on performance management, specifically in A2211, it could also read now, potentially, performance agreements must include or clear and measurable work objectives with associated performance measures, including Indigenous procurement targets that are linked to the priorities of the organization and the Government of Canada. Again, this is something that can be done without being legislated. I know that they talked about the other programs that were held. In the US, it was actually legislated, and that's what made the difference. I think it was under President Nixon that brought that executive order forward in 1968. And I think here in Canada, the mandate is a good start, but as Shannon also mentioned, there does need to be teeth to it. Otherwise, it's not going to resonate and happen.
And I do believe you referenced having a reporting back in the mains and the supplementary estimates. if you could find that in your notes and also repeat that for the purpose of committee, my hope again is that, you know, the colleagues that we have here in government, the policy people who are tapped into these calls will get a chance to hear this and maybe take you up on it as a form of you know, real movement from this government towards outcomes.
Can I add one thing? So I'll tell you where Australia really made the big change. They hit they issued the targets, but the only change really happened when the government departments were transparent with how they achieved their targets, and they showed them to each other, so that there was a competitive environment of your department is now showing where you stand with Indigenous procurement, and that's when real change happened, because now department heads and their bureaucrats were doing everything they could to achieve it.
And while I certainly support that, I would also love to see it reflected to the public. I would love to see it presented in our reports that come back through public accounts, because again, within the culture of the government, that's one thing, but I think there's also a forward-facing public responsibility, and I can't quite get the words, but maybe I'll reference back to the Hansard if Mr. Ducharme doesn't have those handy.
I actually do have it handy. So it was actually Ms. Bull also brought that forward to the committee on February 22nd. And that is for the committee to consider measures that would mandate government departments and agencies to report on their purchases from Indigenous businesses as part of their submissions to the main estimates and the supplementary estimates. Again, when they do their supplementary estimates, they can state at that time what their Indigenous procurement is. And again, that's another form of recording it and ensuring that that is happening.
Well, one of the ways that I hope to document this, it'll be in the Hansard. Again, I believe everybody around this table wants to see these programs succeed. I really do. One of the commitments I'm going to leave to all of you is that taking those recommendations, I'm going to go ahead and put those into a formal letter from myself out of my office to the ministers responsible, just again, to have it on paper, have it on the public record. And it's my hope that this time next year, you don't have to come back, or Ms. Bull doesn't have to come back with this request again. My hope is to see it actually in the systems and principles and reporting mechanisms of government, because this is a government that says it wants to be committed to being open by default. And I would like to see that accountability carry through. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And thank you, Mr. Green, and thank you for the witnesses. We will now go to our second round, and we will start with Mr. Paul Hughes for 5 minutes.
Merci, monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, everyone. I'm in Quebec City, and I'm just very close to the Wendake community, and it's well integrated in the city. They have wonderful businesses there, and I'm familiar with several of them. What I'm wondering about, and I hope that the interpretation will be good so we understand each other, I'd like to speak, Mr. Ducharme, Ms. Suter, Mr. Matata-Wabin. You talked about trust. Problems of trust between the government and Indigenous communities and the business world can be difficult. So one of my questions is very technical, so I hope you'll be well understood. Do you think that the fact that businesses, Indigenous businesses, okay, let me start again. Do you think that given that the Canadian government doesn't have any legal means, if there is a contractual problem over Indigenous communities, do you think that it's a factor that will affect the few the few contracts that exist between the government and your communities? I'll start with Mr. Ducharme. I hope the question is clear.
Thank you, Mr. Paulus. I'm not sure if the question is clear, but I think you did talk about trust. And I think that is an area that we are struggling with. I know a lot of our businesses have said, I alluded to the one company that's done 32 bids within the last year. We held a recovery forum last year through work. And it was a little bit sad because we had so many businesses that said that they were no longer going to be applying to the federal government for contracts. And that kind of hurt a little bit because we are working quite closely. Mr. Green did mention that he believes all parties are interested in this. That does make us feel good. And I think that's what we need to do. And we relate that message back to our businesses to try and bring them back into the fold. I think it seems in the past we've taken one step forward and 2 steps back, but that trust issue, I think that is something that we really need to work with the federal government so that our businesses do look at opportunities with the procurement.
Donc, je vais essayer de reprendre ma
I'll try to pose the question differently. Is the trust issue connected to the fact that the government might have doubts about the quality of products that are made by Indigenous businesses? And that if there's a quality issue, then there's no remedy before the courts for them. So do you think that's an issue and that that has an effect on how much business you're getting?
If I can go,
Go.
I think with creating anything new within a colonial system where anywhere from maybe only 10 to 15% of all employees within the government are maybe people of color, that is a big issue. And when you're asking a frontline manager to go away from what he's used to, which is going with what he knows, and selecting an Indigenous person, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen unless you have real targets that force that to happen. The only way that people, Indigenous people, enter the corporate sector is when the corporations open a door by creating a training program, by creating summer student employment, by creating some sort of mechanism that allows an Indigenous person to say, hey, there's an opportunity, I'm going to enter that door. That's the only way that it's going to happen. The government needs to do the same thing. 20 years ago, me and Rocky were working with the Aboriginal Business Canada program, trying to jumpstart businesses. They were given that opportunity of procurement. Procurement's going to be huge. Everybody come to the door. But the problem was they never created that awareness program or made it worth it for those frontline managers to make that change and to select that Indigenous person. So all those people that were putting in proposal after proposal were getting no's and no's and no's. They went somewhere else. And that's what happened. It's happening again because during this COVID crisis, we were told we were going to be part of this COVID response. We have Indigenous entrepreneurs that invested on First Nations, creating masks. Wikwemekong has a mask facility, creating masks, 3-ply, has not received one government contract. That's where we stand.
If I might add to those comments, I do believe that trust is a huge element. I mean, there's a lot of the historical past is going to enter into this, and things that might not necessarily relate to the business world definitely come forward if you're an entrepreneur. So when we talk about quality, I would also say that has to do with concerns about whether or not there's hesitation on the capability to deliver. And whether it's perceived or not a reality, the feeder system, the 5%, and using the term from Mr. Ducharme about the weeding out process, that is of real concern, and it sometimes appears as if the system is set up to enable Indigenous businesses to fail. So rather than how can we get you through the process, it's kind of perceived as one of, it's a futile exercise.
Thank you, Ms. Suter, and thank you, Mr. Paul Hoos. We'll now go to Mr. McKinnon. Sorry, Mr. Sinclair. Just of timing, unfortunately. We'll go to Mr. McKinnon for 5 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And we'll direct you the first question, Mr. Sinclair. But I just want to pick up on something I think Mr. McCauley said earlier, and I want to honor the work that I know all of you have been involved in with respect to developing the Indigenous procurement strategy of the Government of Canada. There have been so much dialogue. There have been so many working sessions and dialogues. One of you referenced the OSME and the good outreach work that's going on. We saw the budget contain some $87 million over 5 years to advance, among other things, the Indigenous procurement strategy. And so many of you have noted the importance of a trusted partner in the communities that people can look to, but also a point of contact for the Government of Canada. The Australian case has been noted and remarked upon. I think they call it Supply Nation. Just want to perhaps ask our witnesses, and we'll start with you, Mr. Sinclair, since you got the short end a moment ago. How are those plans evolving? How is that looking from your various perspectives? And do you think that we will continue down the road of establishing this sort of trusted partner to advance the cause of Indigenous procurement?
Firstly, I'd like to apologize for the audio issues I was having, and I did miss most of the early conversation. I do apologize for that, and hopefully I'm not repeating some of the things that were said by others. But in general terms, I don't have direct experience or knowledge of the Australian model. However, I do have limited knowledge in terms of the efforts that they're making in Australia in terms of the relationship with the Indigenous peoples in their country. And it really requires a resetting of a relationship, and this procurement strategy is a good example of an initiative that was ill-designed, has been around since 1996. And
referring to PSAP now, or?
Exactly, yeah. PSAP. And, from my perspective as an individual that has worked in Indigenous business development and finance for over 30 years, it's almost been a running joke. And, I do realize that there is good intentions behind it, but certainly the design speaks for itself, or the old design speaks for itself. And I believe there's also good examples out there, not just in Australia, but within our own country, right? In terms of establishing trust, in terms of designing programs properly, in terms of establishing good, solid trust relationships with our communities and our own institutions and our own agencies. And NACA is a good example of that. We've worked very hard to prove that what we do is important. And I think those examples exist. And if you look to those examples, I think they will serve as a design template or a way to do things that might not have been done with the procurement strategy. So, I do recognize that this strategy has existed through many election cycles. This is owned by different parties, and it hasn't changed a whole lot in terms of effectiveness on the front lines. And there's many reasons for that. But anyway, it's just general comments. I don't know if I'm answering your question in any way, but I needed to get in the mix here. So
we don't have much time left, but perhaps for the others, if you could comment briefly on the work of the reference group and the work towards establishing a business case for an Indigenous organization that would work on Indigenous procurement.
Sure. So since July 2020.
Excuse me for interrupting, and I apologize. And Mr. McKinnon, I am going to add the extra 20 seconds to your time for interrupting. Mr. Matawaban, the interpreters are wondering if maybe you can turn off your video feed. There's a little bit of and they're just having trouble with the language. So and try and answer if that way. We'll try that if you would. Thank you. And Mr. McKinnon, I'll give you another 20 seconds.
Well, thank you. And perhaps this is a longer topic, so perhaps one of my colleagues can pick this up in a moment, but over to you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Matawaban. Go ahead and answer the question if you can.
Okay, so I totally forgot what the question was again. So
Supply Nation.
Yes. So we started that in July 2020, which is far too late. This process should have started a lot earlier, because at those meetings we identified that there wasn't a lot of Indigenous-led information or consultation or engagement. So that's when we started the process, and now we're engaged in about 5 different research papers that talks about Indigenous definition, looking at, there's a business plan for an Indigenous-led institution, because trust is a big issue. When you look at the United Declarations on the Rights of Indigenous People, it says the institutions need to be led and owned by the Indigenous people to provide the services on behalf of Indigenous. So we see that with this procurement. It's a day and night thing. It's a 24/7 service that you have to be on top of the departments. You have to know what's coming down the pipeline, and you have to get some businesses prepared to submit their proposals. So it's something that it needs to be done fully and wholesomely. There's a number of institutions in Canada that support finance through NACA, CCAB through corporate development and business. We have CANDO. We have a number of organizations that provide services, but an Indigenous-led institution that is procurement would be the highlight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Matawaban. And we'll now go to Ms. Vignola for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. You were speaking about this earlier, and we've seen it, that there is this 5% objective for contracts that should be granted to Indigenous companies, but something like 0.8% have been on average since '96, if my memory serves me well. So in your opinion, is the 5% objective a target that's realistic? And secondly, how could the government act to really achieve that? And thirdly, what would be a reasonable time frame to achieve this goal? Because we've seen now that for 25 years it hasn't happened. Thank you.
If I could answer that one, I think there is changes that are being made. I know that the federal government, and I've mentioned it a few times, is not the best at relaying the information and reporting it, but there was a report that was just released a while ago from the PSAB program. And from 2015 to 2018, there has been an incredible increase in procurement opportunities. In 2018, PSAB actually started reporting the spend that was not part of the PSAB program, that were not set-asides. And at that time, it was 1.96% of the federal procurement. When we started working with the federal government and going to the government, we had that 5%. That, again, that was a floor, and that was just set based on our Indigenous population. And we wanted it to be over 5 years because, again, we don't want the government to be set up for failure. The government hasn't always been our friend, but again, realistically, we want to ensure that this is going to be something that's sustainable, something that's going to happen. And it is happening. I think one of the things that looks like it's been happening in the past now is that it used to be the PSAB was in the ISP portfolio, but it looks like more ministries are becoming involved in that. And I think that's what it has to be done. It has to be entirely across the federal government, all the ministries, even Crown corporations. I think Defence Construction Canada is probably one of the most proactive out of the Crown corporations within the federal government to ensure or try and increase opportunities for our Indigenous businesses.
If I could add on to that, just a couple of points that have come from my discussions with Indigenous business owners and entrepreneurs is the uncertainty whether or not there is a mandate, or at the very least an expectation, that the set-asides will be considered and applied through all federal departments. At this point in time, it would appear that there are some departments that have that as a target and others that don't. And the example that was given to me is with Indigenous Services Canada and the funding that they are in charge of with respect to capital projects within First Nations. And that the gap in there is the fact that when those contracts for the build of infrastructure on First Nations are issued, they are not typically granted or in the consideration for those businesses that are part of the PSAP set aside. So to me, that's a glaring disparity when we are utilizing First Nations funds for First Nations infrastructure, and yet the First Nations are not in a position to engage or at least propose on work that would further their Indigenous communities.
Thank you, Ms. Suter. We'll now go to Mr. Green for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you. And I want to make sure I'm setting the record straight from my perspective, the grace that I have extended to the members of this particular committee in a nonpartisan way, I don't extend that grace to government. In fact, I want to just go ahead and name that systemic racism has provided a considerable barrier to Indigenous procurement. And there's a particular type of anti-Indigenous racism that is presented. And we've heard now about trust. We've heard about the 70% cuts to programming that would help make these businesses more viable within our procurement supply chains. And there's two things that we know to be true during COVID, that we missed an opportunity, as Ms. Suter has identified, in terms of PSAP and the set-asides, the amount of money that has gone out in this COVID time, I think was a missed opportunity. But there is going to be a COVID recovery. There is going to be significant investments in infrastructure. There could be significant opportunities to ensure that we get it right this time around. So I want to just, if I could, direct my question to Mr. Sinclair in my last round here, to talk a little bit about what it would look like to have the 70% cuts restored to the types of programs which would help the supply chain and get Indigenous businesses into the supply chain at 2021, years values.
Without knowing specifically what those 70% cuts relate to, I would say, in my experience of the effects of those cuts and the work that we do on the front lines in the community, they are not only felt by the entrepreneur in the community and those fledgling businesses, but institutionally. So for an organization, and I'm speaking from as an AFI or an Aboriginal financial institution, those kinds of cuts, of course, are deep, and it makes it difficult for us to do our job and to be able to support those entrepreneurs to develop or have their businesses progress to a point to be able to realize some of those opportunities. So it really, it really is in some ways, where we started from in terms of developmental lending. We still need all of those supports in order to even come close to realizing some of those opportunities.
Thank you, Mr. Sinclair, and thank you, Mr. Green. We will now go to Mr. McCauley for 5 minutes.
Great. Thanks again, witnesses. Great feedback we're receiving here. And Mr. Sinclair, it's good to see you here. I was at Enoch a couple of weeks ago visiting the fire hall. Have some work there to do, so I'm hoping we can get some work done on that. I want to ask, or actually make a couple of comments. When we did this study 3.5 years ago on how to better serve Indigenous small businesses, I spent some time with the U.S. Small Business Administration, and they don't actually set goals as we're trying to do here. They do it on a name and shame business. They actually far exceed their goals, similar to the numbers that you were talking about in Australia. And I asked how they did that, and they said no one in the government, the bureaucrats, want to be the person that does not reach their targeted goals for marginalized groups. So even without these kind of concrete goals, some other countries are succeeding. I'd like to hear about, we heard a bunch about difficulty meeting qualifying restrictions. Can you give us some examples, Ms. Suter? I think you brought it up.
Thank you. I'll give you a couple of real live examples. An RFP was completed. I think there was something like 55 hours, 60 hours put into this RFP. And in the fine print within that RFP was a requirement to submit the technical response on one USB and the narrative on another. And the entrepreneur overlooked that one requirement and was immediately disqualified from the process. The second example would be, again, an RFP that went in with after significant hours of investment. And again, the fine print had indicated that the font needed to be a certain size within the document. And unfortunately, the font was not the 11, it was probably a 12. And so again, the application got kicked out very early in the process. So, you know, and I have to ask in both scenarios, what did that have to do with the quality and the content of the response? Absolutely nothing. So I think taking a really good look at what those criterias are for responses kind of first and foremost.
Right. Mr. Ducharme, I saw you nodding. Do you have anything?
Well, I do agree with everything Ms. Suter said. One of the other ones was, it was interesting when one of the RFPs that came out was for cloth face masks. I mean, the federal government came out right at the beginning in March saying we are looking at businesses to pivot to help us meet the needs. And within that RFP, one of the requirements was that you had to have had 3 previous cloth requirements. How are we going to be able to get any opportunities if we had to have had those requirements before even applying to the RFP? So I think that's something that the government has to look at if they're really serious about bringing in Indigenous businesses. That is one of the, and again, that's sort of almost like a weed out thing, sort of what Ms. Suter was talking about. But I think that's a prime example just within the last year that we heard from.
No, that's an excellent example. The previous thing I'm going to bring up again, we heard about the difficulties in scaling up businesses. One of the things we've heard the Mother Parliament, our friends in the UK, do is when large contracts are given to, say, a PCO who's doing the parliamentary precinct work, they actually require them to repost on the government website their subcontracting jobs. We try to push through that. It got nowhere. Do you think something like this would help with the scaling issue, where perhaps a company's not large enough to bid on $1 billion, but they're shut out of the subcontracting? It's still taxpayers' money, but they're not getting access to the subcontracting jobs.
I believe that is something that the government does have to look at. And I understand that in a lot of the RFPs that are coming out right now, they are asking for the impact benefit plans, because the federal government is looking at their prime vendors to help them meet that 5%. And that's something that has to be, they have to record and they have to monitor that. What makes us a little nervous is when they have these Indigenous benefit plans, what is the follow through? What happens if they haven't met the requirements? There's been instances in the past where Indigenous businesses partnered with someone on a contract, the non-Indigenous business wins a contract, and when the work is actually awarded, they tell the Indigenous, we no longer need your capabilities for this contract. So they were utilized for that. Again, I think it has to be incentivized, and even when you look at the federal government in the US, if they don't meet that target, I believe they're put into a caution, and they may not have the opportunity to rebid on upcoming government contracts.
Yeah, no, excellent point. Is there anything working right now? Anything, any good news we can see in the procurement process? Feel free to say no.
I do think there is some stuff that is working. As I said earlier, I mean, I've never had as much connections with different departments in the government.
What is working that we can build upon?
Thank you.
I mean,
excuse me for interrupting, but thank you. Our time is up. But Mr. Sharm, if you feel that there's more that you would like to answer, if you want to submit that in writing to the clerk, that would be greatly appreciated. We will now, I do believe we're going to Mr. Kazmierczuk next in for 5 minutes. Mr. Kazmierczuk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this is just an open question. It's kind of a basic question, but I think it's important to understand. What impact has the pandemic had on Indigenous businesses? Whether it's talking about revenue, whether it's cancellation of contracts, whether it's even being able to access the proper mentoring and supports throughout the process. Can you just give us a picture of how disruptive COVID has been on Indigenous businesses?
I can start. I think one of the areas that we've lost a lot of our opportunities was a lot of the Indigenous businesses were smaller and they relied on face-to-face meetings. They would have especially the artisans would go to powwows or they go to trade shows and they go around and do that. One of the areas that we struggle as well is a lot of our businesses, everything is online right now, and there is a lot of connectivity issues for some of the remote locations and some of the First Nations. From the businesses that we deal with, I would say close to 30% don't even have a website. And again, that's something that we're trying to educate the businesses on, because most people will do a search on a website for the company to before they would approach them. So I think that's an area where we've struggled. And again, not regarding employment or not regarding procurement, but Indigenous businesses were not able to take advantage of a lot of the programming that was introduced until groups like ourselves and NACA stepped in and said, like, things need to be changed. So we have been disadvantaged in a lot of ways that other businesses haven't.
If I can just speak directly to my experience on the lending side and supports to entrepreneurs in the First Nations within Alberta. We were right in the middle of the downturn in the oil and gas economy, so we were already hurting very bad in Alberta, and then of course the pandemic following that has caused a lot of problems and failures in our community. In terms of just the pandemic itself, I think probably more on in terms of our organization would be in our ability to deliver what we need to deliver in the community, and understanding that the kind of support that we provide is really hands-on, and the limitations and the challenges of the pandemic have affected us greatly, and we're going to have to make up for lost time in that regard. So it really has been on a holding pattern currently, but yeah, it's been tough, just like everybody else out there.
I could add on to that a little bit with respect to a lot of our businesses, it's already been said, are owner operated or smaller businesses, and just not having the ability to pivot quickly or have the resources to help with a pivot strategy was definitely felt here. And then of course, it's an unfortunate outcome of pandemic is all the social disorder that has resonated, and I think there was reference made to discrimination and those sorts of things. And unfortunately, we have seen that heightened, not just here in Edmonton and Alberta, but certainly across the country. And that has been difficult to manage as well.
And I know that when I was working for a regional innovation center, we had actually started a program called Supporting Indigenous Youth Entrepreneurs in Windsor, Essex. We had run that program for 2 years. And I know other regional innovation centers across Ontario run similar programs like that. But again, they're concentrated around sort of big urban areas. How can some of the government programs, agencies, for example, like OSME, the Organization for Small and Medium-Sized Enterprises, how can they actually bridge that gap and reach out to more communities and outside of those major sort of urban hubs, to be able to provide that connection, get the awareness out, and also maybe provide some mentoring and help build that capacity?
I would say that the Aboriginal Financial Institution Network has 59 members from coast to coast to coast, and doing this for more than 35 years. So Rocky's got one of the first AFIs that was ever created. It was in Alberta, and they connect with their communities on a daily basis. And they've been developing entrepreneurs. They have deep social connections within the regions that they operate, and to create a partnership with the AFI network would instantly connect you to the community. So if there's programs and services, and the AFI network has been processing government support programs for many decades now. We've processed $3 billion in lending to 50,000 loans. That's the reach of the AFI network. Now, this has been successful because there's a stimulus program that was in place. And this is the one I referenced with the 70% decline. 20 years ago, it was about an $80 million program with 10 offices in the urban and a bunch of Aboriginal financial institutions. That program was reduced down to $34 million. So this stimulus program that enables a loan to be bought down, so the risk is bought down, so that entrepreneur is going to have a better chance at success, and they've had lots of success. And the program has showed that it's an investment. For every dollar provided, it's $1.20 back in the government's Treasury Department. Never mind about the social impacts that are felt and the reduced in social spend that happens from supporting an Indigenous business. And I forgot where I was going with that. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Matatawaban. And now we will go to Mr. Paul Hughes for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now, we've been talking for just over an hour, and I think that we're turning in circles in a way. We're coming back to the same basic problems. There's the problem of trust, but also what we heard in the presentations, that there's a lot of discussions with the government. Mr. Ducharme talked about that. So I hope that we can finish the reunion today by finding at least one solution that will help everyone. Because what's interesting here is that we have people representing entrepreneurs here. These are people who want to do business and that are to the benefit of everyone. So in the case of COVID, it's not just Indigenous companies that have had problems with the government in terms of contracting. A lot of other companies have as well, and they don't know why. However, I would have greatly preferred to be able to buy products from you than from China. Having said that, how are we going to make this work? I was talking about what the Wendake Reserve that is next door to us here. And I know that there are businesses in Wendake, and there's the legislation that applies to the population there, but also there are different rules in the city of Quebec, there are the provincial and municipal regulations and rules. So I wonder if the fact of saying that you're an Indigenous business when you apply creates a problem at the outset. So Mr. Ducharme, in your case, did you have groups that have applied for contracts and that weren't Indigenous groups, but has that been tried that people would apply and not mention that they're Indigenous? Or are there businesses that have a double status that are Indigenous but not necessarily, so they might not have to say that in filling out the application?
Exactly. We do have a number of our businesses that have applied to the PSAB program. And within the PSAB program, you are identifying that you're an Indigenous-owned business. They never got the PSAB contracts. When they applied to open tenders within the federal government, they've been successful in the contracts. So I think there is an unconscious bias within the procurement evaluations on Indigenous businesses. And I think when you talked about one of the concrete things that needs to happen is, again, it does have to be past the mandate, and it has to be within the executive and within the management's reporting requirements. So they have to have that target that's set right in there. If they have that target, then they're going to make sure that it is happening. I think within the corporate world, when you look at Suncor, they have done that. That came from the head down, the top down, and they went to all the buying managers and said, this is what you need to do. If you don't get it, you're not going to, your evaluation is not going to be 100% successful, potential not having the bonuses as well. And I think that's the one thing that really needs to happen with the federal government for Indigenous procurement is it has to be incentivized and teeth to it.
Can I just add something?
I understand your points. That's why I have a philosophy that is, rather than imposing quotas, I'm trying to see if there's a solution to have efficiency that would be brought about more naturally, more organically, because sometimes when things are pushed on people, there's resistance. But we might not have the choice but to go that way. So I think Mr. Matatawaban wanted to say something.
Well, I say rather than trying to have a paintbrush approach to it and saying that everybody's going to be fair under a system that doesn't have an Indigenous procurement process, it's not going to work because we are living in a discriminatory system already, and there's no way that our entrepreneurs would be able to enter that door without having this door available to them. So we have to really just become good at creating this door, do it in the right way, and implement mandatory targets that's transparent so everybody can see. Once Canadians know that by investing in Indigenous entrepreneur, you're going to take a $9 billion program for Indigenous spend from 96 that was 17 billion last year, that's looking to be about $40 billion in another 25 years, that you're going to see a lot more of the Clearwater type of business opportunities if Indigenous people have access to capital, have the right skills, are able to impact their communities. They are going to invest wisely. We have to do this right, and we have to foster the culture of awareness in the government. Thank you.
Can I make one quick comment?
Mr. Chair?
Just in regards to solutions, has there been any thoughts to, well, firstly, to present the problems? There isn't one paintbrush that's going to solve the problem for us because of the complexities and the historical complexities in our communities. So we're talking not just to First Nations, I mean, it's Indigenous procurement. So there's lots of complexities, and there's regional challenge and urban versus rural and sophistication versus startup, huge complexities. So would there be any thought given to a concierge type service, a design that could be met to meet those complexities? So whether it be done regionally or provincially, or some way to recognize the complexities and the differences within our own business community and our communities in general.
Thank you, Mr. Sinclair. And I didn't want to cut you off again, so I appreciate giving you that chance to have and comment. So we'll now go to Mr. Drouin for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I too want to say that I will be speaking with you and asking you questions on the unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe territory. And I want to, like Mr. McCauley, who said at the beginning, you've been more than patient to spend time with us. So thank you so much. I've listened to this conversation, and it is really interesting. I've heard some comments that I've heard before. My question would be probably to Mr. Duchalme first. You've mentioned that a lot of Indigenous businesses you've spoken to sometimes are just simply not aware of the federal opportunity until the RFP is out. You've mentioned that you are working with the OSME office. You're working, there seems to be engagement. Are you mostly working with small businesses, or are they large businesses that operate with or trying to do business with the government? And I'm asking that because just from an SME perspective, having somebody watching or monitoring the buy and sell website 24/7 is just physically impossible. They have to be doing something else. So just asking you that, and if you've mentioned training, perhaps, be curious to hear you on what type of training we could do from the federal perspective, government, on how to best respond to RFPs.
Thank you. I think one of the things that, again, it is a very hard system to navigate. As I said, within our Aboriginal procurement marketplace that we created at CCAB and supply chain, we do go to the buy and sell. And there isn't a consistent way with the buy and sell to show which ones are the PSAB companies. RFPs, you go in and you do a search, and it all depends. Like, each one of the procurement managers have a different way of doing it. If there was one standardized way that would say, okay, this is a PSAB program, check it off, and then that way it'd be easy to search that. I think that would be a simple solution. And as for the larger businesses, we do have larger businesses that are trying to get the federal procurement contracts, but one of the areas that they run into is the bid bonds. And that's the thing. I think the federal government, if they look at those bid bonds in the future, is there a way of maybe doing a 10% holdback on the contract instead of having to have that bid bond? And Ms. Suter also mentioned the insurance. So each time you apply for insurance, you can get an increase in insurance according to the amount of the contract that you had. So those are some areas that we can work with. And I think the training that we do. I mean, we're a small team at CCAB, and I think Shannon has also mentioned that we're all coming together. This is a lot bigger than one organization, but we have been working a lot with it. And I think with the government, there are the needs. We've done a webinar where we actually did the reverse so that the suppliers could see, they would evaluate the RFPs so that that would help them in a way as well, just know what they need to do when they're actually applying to the RFPs. So training that we can get to our businesses, and I think that can go through CANDO, and that can also go with NACA and the financial officers that they have.
Great, and I'll just, did somebody else want to jump in there and just add some comments?
Well, just on training specifically, for the Indigenous businesses, I think we are good with the AFI network, interfacing with the Indigenous entrepreneur and providing training. We could use some more support to ensure that we can add to our complement so that they can do the right work. But really the problem is within the government itself. Governments have always had a problem with aligning their own systems. You have multiple programs and services that are being done at different levels of the government. There was almost 200 plus economic development programs that is counted that weren't aligned. If we can get everybody to align, it's kind of like a centralized, decentralized system. You have PSPC that's providing a service for all the departments, and they're all decentralized, but a more centralized system would work, and each of them doing their own procurement. So it's a really mixed up system, and it needs a lot of cultural awareness. So if we can give the departments a reason to want to do it, they will do it.
Great, thank you. And Mr. Duchamp, I think you said Defense Construction is seems to be doing a better job at engaging. And I'd like to know, what are they doing that perhaps the Government of Canada could adopt as a whole?
Well, I think I'm getting, they seem to be going into the directory and they're looking at the businesses. So a lot of our businesses, they say, you know what, we've gotten a call from Defense Construction Canada. They're not going in with one keyword search and saying, okay, that's it, we're not going to go past another company. What they do is they look to see, is there a possibility? And they're reaching out to our business members saying, we have this opportunity coming up. Is this something that was going to be of interest to you? Again, so many times everything is just through one narrow tunnel. You're looking, and you do have to kind of expand the search. And my understanding from what I've heard from our suppliers is that Defense Construction Canada is doing that.
Great,
thank you. Thank you, Mr. Drouin, and thank you, Mr. Ducharme. We will now go to Ms. Vignola for 2.5 minutes.
2.5 minutes is so short.
Mr. Chair? Sorry, point of order.
Mr. Green?
I just, we had a 2.5 minute. Is this not now a 5?
No, because it's scheduled as we roll forward, because normally we go a 1 hour meeting and then we have newer witnesses and then another hour, but when we're extending, then it continues on at this pace, is my understanding.
No, we should have a 5-minute intervention now.
I will just hold on for a second then, please.
Let it be on the record. I'm fighting for the speaking time and the rights of Quebecers and the Bloc Québécois here at committee. Thank you.
But you're using up her time. Sorry, Ms. Vignola.
Except you're wrong.
Noted.
My understanding is we have a 6-minute, a 2.5, and then a 5 if we extend into the next round. I've never done 2.5 minutes rounds back to back.
Might be because we just have 1 2-hour block as opposed to 2 1 hours.
Looks like we're going to the instant replay here with the clerk. He's going to the box to check the screen and see what we got here. See if this is going to be a goal or no goal.
And sorry, thank you for that. I just wanted to clarify what the wording is. And the wording actually, as I've indicated, is as we roll into second and subsequent rounds, that we continue with that second round. But I'll get the clerk just to comment on it for you, Mr. Green. And by the way, Ms. Vignola, I have stopped your time, so you haven't started yet. So.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In the motion that identifies and sets the time for questioning of witnesses, it talks about that the first round, there'll be 6 minutes for each of the recognized parties. In the motion, it says after that, for the second and subsequent rounds, the order and time for questioning be as follows. And it outlines that it would be 5 minutes for the Conservative Party, 5 minutes for the Liberal Party, 2.5 minutes for the Bloc Québécois, 2.5 minutes for the NDP, 5 minutes for the Conservative Party, and 5 minutes for the Liberal Party. Where there could be, where this would change is if you change the panels, you would start new with a round one, and each party gets 6 minutes in the first round. That is the way that is my understanding of how we interpret the motion. It does rest at the discretion of the chair, but that is the way the motion was adopted by the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. With that, we will now go to Ms. Vignola for 2.5 minutes.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. So I was listening carefully to you, and there's the fact that we also received 30,000 pages from the businesses participating in this equity program on the number of First Nations, visible minorities, people with disabilities, etc. And I was thinking that all of these statistics must weigh down the process for the businesses involved. So there are the very big companies that are able to do these kinds of follow-ups that have the resources to do this. But to promote diversity, we have to promote and defend small and medium-sized businesses as well. So I think you believe that there's too much red tape for smaller players here, the SMEs. What could really tangibly facilitate this work for small and medium-sized businesses so that they would get contracts?
I would like to start. During my opening remarks, I said that we're working on a business plan for an Indigenous-led institution. I think that that would be more of the concierge sort of service, working with departments, understanding what's coming down the pipeline, getting the businesses ready, also doing some educational programming, working with the partners. You need somebody that's sort of stick handling everything in the middle. And I think the big part that I keep on bringing up is the government just does not want to change. There needs to be some really big time awareness. Australia, I'll bring them up again. They have reconciliation action plans that corporate, that government, that everybody buys into, and they have to really outline exactly what they're going to do to make a difference in the Indigenous lives. It's almost like an IBA. It's looking at training, looking at business support services, looking at processes, looking at awareness within their organizations. This needs to take place within the government. Thank you.
I'd like to add comment that I think it would be important to scale the requirements in that RFP to the nature of the opportunity. So it would take some time to ensure that it's not sort of a blanket approach for large versus small. There are some nuances that could change within that RFP requirement.
Thank you, Ms. Suter, and thank you, Ms. Vignola. And Ms. Vignola, you are correct. 2.5 minutes comes by very quickly. And we'll go now to Mr. Green for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Both Ms. Suter and Mr. St. Clair have been kind of cut off on some of the remaining of their questions. And I'd like to turn it over, beginning with Ms. Suter, to just add anything that has been front of mind, but time didn't permit you to fully answer, in terms of points that you want this committee to take away from.
Thank you for that. I did want to share an example with you. that I think will speak to capacity, it'll speak to programming, training, etc. Several years ago, I was asked to write a business plan, a feasibility study, and then eventually manage a small business incubator for a First Nation in the heart of the oil sands. The funding had been secured, and we moved forward with developing that small business incubator. I was there on the ground every day working with entrepreneurs on various stages of their business, be that marketing, responding to RFPs, creating partnerships, just providing that whole host of development services for them. And we were making some significant traction. We had about 16 really healthy businesses that were up and running and making a difference, not just in the community, but within the industry in its sector entirely. And then, of course, the 3-year funding agreement ran out. It was not renewed, and that unfortunately, that business incubator went away. Left not only the 16 businesses that were really just starting to get their feet under them, struggling, but there were so many others that were in the midst of startup that weren't able to move forward. So that's a sad example of the funding and the nature of the funding cycles and how that affects progress.
Could I ask? Unfortunately, I'm also going to run out of time, which is why I fought for my earlier time. Was that private sector funding or was that federal funding, Ms. Suter, for the incubator?
It was federal funding.
And do you recall the program that it was?
I don't I want to say rural development, but I would have to look back through my files and provide that information to you.
Well, thank you for sharing that, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Green, you still have another minute.
Really?
Yes.
I have a timer here, and I'll take it.
Well, maybe
I could give it back to Ms. Vignola.
I must have hit the clock a little bit after. I was cutting you a little slack here, so I appreciate you, but you have a little bit more time. So you've got a minute left, please.
Well, I'll just say that at a future committee meeting, I may be moving a motion, should we return back to the next session, to ensure that us third and fourth parties get our 5 minutes.
Don't waste your minute, Mr. Green.
It's all good. You can have it back.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I will stop my clock here, and we will now go to Mr. Macaulay for 5 minutes.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. 5, not 2.5. Mr. Descharmes, I think it was you that mentioned the issue about one of the businesses you dealt with had the capability of providing masks and had bid on some of the COVID business. Was that yourself who brought that up? I'm sorry.
That would be me. This is Shannon.
Oh, yeah. Did you ever receive any feedback on why a business like that did not get the contract, or similar businesses? Was it price? Was it just no response, or?
It was a national security confidentiality. They weren't able to provide any feedback to the business owner other than say that they weren't eligible, even though they had invested in a facility to be built on a First Nation, hiring First Nation people, invested quite heavily in the equipment, thinking that the procurement process would work. And there was no indicators within the process to select for any social impacts to say that somebody would score higher for being on a First Nation, hiring First Nations, impacting First Nations.
They invoked national security.
Yes, they did.
Good Lord, that's garbage. I'm sorry. We see this again and again where in order to sole source something to preferred vendor or someone they want, it's national security. I highly doubt it's national security, and I think you would agree with me, it's a national security issue of buying masks and supporting a Indigenous business. I'm wondering is there any low-hanging fruit? Now, it's probably very obvious, but just for the record, low-hanging fruit, quick changes the government can make to better help Indigenous businesses procure government contracts. I know we talked about the insurance one. We could change that because we've heard this before 3 years ago, but what other low-hanging fruit could the government make immediate change on?
I think it would be regarding the RFPs and scaling the RFPs as to the amount of work that's done. If you're wanting to include more of the small businesses, to respond to an RFP with the federal government, you almost need a full-time employee that's a proposal writer. And I think if that was geared to the size of the contract, that would increase opportunities for the smaller Indigenous businesses.
Great. Now, and this was a theme that came up repeatedly when we did the same study 3.5 years ago, and unfortunately, nothing's changed since then. We hear whether it's women-led business, Indigenous-led business, other SMEs. You know, we heard, you know, Amazon for their HQ2 was an 8-page RFP, whereas for us, it's 100 pages for a roll of toilet paper. It's silly. So, anything else, low-hanging fruit? Obviously, scalability is one. Anything else that we could implement relatively painlessly and quickly, if there is such a thing within government?
Well, I think that the company that Shannon was talking about, I mean, that company invested their own money in it. They got no funding from the government to help them start this manufacturing plant. They brought the cost of their stuff down to 10 to 12 cents per mask. I mean, you might be able to get it from a foreign company for 6 to 7 cents, but when you look at it, are you spending that 10 to 12 cent per mask here in Canada that in turn is into hiring Indigenous people, and that money is staying in Canada, where the other one, that money is going outside of the US? I think that would be a really quick one that I look at that company right now. I mean, they have 20 million masks sitting because within that RFP, they had to guarantee that if the government came to look at their warehouse, that they would have that on stock.
Wow. Mr. Chair, how much time do I have, please?
You have 1 minute and 15 seconds.
Great. Ms. Suter, I'm going to bounce back to you, please, because you've dealt with the energy businesses a lot. And again, in the previous study, we heard repeatedly how the energy companies, Suncor, et cetera, we're setting a very high bar and achieving it for Indigenous participation. Can you give us some examples of what they're doing right that perhaps the government should make steps to copy?
When
they're not trying to shut down the oil business?
The one that is very obvious to me is within many of those resource companies, there has been a Indigenous inclusion evaluation criteria within all the RFP responses. So it's not about a set aside per se, but it's about anyone responding to an RFP being able to prove that they have an Indigenous inclusion policy and that it is being followed through. And
do you see any reason why the government just couldn't copy that?
That would be my wish, or my suggestion is, why wouldn't we have Indigenous inclusion throughout the country and throughout all of the procurement process? And it could be scored somewhere in the criteria with backup documentation to prove it.
Right.
Thank you, Mr. McCauley, and thank you, Ms. Suter. We will now go to Mr. Weiler for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First question through you to Mr. Ducharme. You mentioned in your introductory remarks that you were leading different training seminars with OSME. And I'm wondering if you've been able to track the effectiveness of those training sessions in terms of if and how that's led to more success through the procurement process with some of the businesses that were involved.
We haven't done an evaluation on the successes of them, but we have had businesses that said that they are applying. Again, some of these contracts take a long time. I mean, when we looked at that mask last year, it took, I think, 2.5 to 3 months for it to be awarded. So there is changes. I think the Indigenous businesses are looking at the RFPs differently. Mind you, you guys also make changes sometimes within the process. That when you went to the when the government went to the Ariba platform, we had done a training on using buy and sell, and everything was done. The first contract that the federal government did for the Ariba system was the Indigenous only business. And it was really hard for us to get in. Even the procurement officers at OSME were trying to go in and learn how to use the system. So I think what we've been trying to do is get them better equipped, and they have been more bids that have been submitted, but we don't have the stats right now. We can find that out though, and get back to you.
Thank you. And just kind of a general question for your opinion here. What level of awareness do you believe that the federal government has on the kind of the Indigenous owned capacity in different areas for procurement? And I'm just wondering if you see a need for that, maybe a training on the other side for the government, just to have a better understanding of where there are opportunities to work more with Indigenous owned companies.
I don't believe that a lot of the procurement officers do know the Indigenous capacity that's out there. We did research with it when we were talking about the 5%. Indigenous businesses do have the capacity to actually procure up to 24% of federal contracts. Most of these departments are not looking past their certain requirements. Again, it's at I don't want to comment on what the procurement managers are doing, but I think there is opportunity if they looked at it. And again, when I went back to Defence Construction Canada, they're looking to see, does that business, they might not see it right there that has a capacity, but they are exploring to see if that is happening.
Thank you. Well, one thing I want to touch on is on outcomes-based procurement. I understand there's been a few programs that the federal government's launched in this respect, including Innovation Solutions Canada, which was putting forward challenges designed to find novel solutions for products that weren't necessarily commercially available, or services not commercially available at the time. And Treasury Board and PSBC had launched an agile procurement initiative to more towards solving a particular problem rather than through lengthy RFPs. And I'm just curious about your thoughts on where there may be some opportunities to do more of this. And I'd like to open this up to all of the three organizations that are here as witnesses. If you see an opportunity to do more of that, to engage Indigenous-owned businesses in federal procurement.
I'd like to use an example that we heard about. Was it in last summer or maybe the fall before COVID hit? Defense Department led a 10-year clothing contract. This one would have been an ideal Indigenous contract that would have probably encapsulated a number of communities to be able to meet the needs of this, if there had been some forward thinking and planning and some will. If we had a process in place where we knew that this was coming out, and we know that the Defense Department needs clothes, right? We know that it's coming out. We just need to know when it's going to be coming out so that we can work with our entrepreneurs to consolidate and coordinate a response and submit a bid. So I think this is what's lacking, is that the RFP just comes out and you're expected to respond. But in the Indigenous case, they've already put in the effort and they saw nothing for it. So them being ready for these things, the trust has left the station. So I think we need to build up that trust again, create an institution, provide the financing and business support services, change the internal culture of the government in selecting Indigenous businesses. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, how long do I have left?
Well, my buzzer just went off, giving you about 10 seconds. So if you've got a really quick question, then
I just want to thank the witnesses again.
Okay, I gave Mr. Green a little extra time, so I figured I could give you a couple extra seconds too. But we now go to the final round, and we will start with Mr. Paul Hughes for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Very interesting, this meeting. We're learning a great deal. There are major problems. They were reported in 2018. We talked a lot about IT problems for the applications that are either they're too complex for many members of your community. IT is perhaps difficult to understand, but there's just an awful lot of red tape in all of these processes, government processes. And on the Conservative side, we tried to cut back on that when we were in power. But on your end, do you feel that, you mentioned the complexity of the processes, but is there something that could be done to simplify this? Because in the end, I mean, non-Indigenous businesses are complaining about access problems as well for this process. So what would be a quick fix to simplify and streamline this? I'll put this question to Mr. Sinclair, or the first person who might have an idea about answering that. What stage of it could be changed immediately to facilitate things?
Well, I certainly wish there was a simple answer to this, but just based on the discussion today, it's complicated. I don't have all of the familiarity with procurement that where I would be able to give you a firm answer in what that might be. I think there were lots of suggestions that were made in testimony today thus far. I think it's going to be going to require collective change in a lot of different areas. I don't think there's a quick fix to it. There's a lot of things outside of just simply changing the way the program operates. There's biases and stereotyping, and there's all kinds of things that factor into the inability of this to be an effective program at this point.
Well, it's a point that comes up often. We hear about systemic racism within the police and everywhere, really. And I'm not saying it doesn't exist. We understand that there is a problem here somewhere. If Indigenous companies are never chosen or they can't get through the process. So I would like us to say goodbye at the end of the meeting with you feeling that you've taken 2-3 hours out of your day and that it was worth it. I really hope that our committee will be able to wrap up a meeting that will be to the benefit of everyone and that will be able to move forward. Because often, as I said in my previous questions earlier on, we're often in a confrontation mode and it doesn't result in anything good. So the process is another story. What other solutions can you see? I mean, but Mr. Sinclair said after a 2-hour meeting of talking about this, clearly it's very complex, and we always come back to this basic problem of lack of trust that we talked about from the beginning between the Government of Canada and Indigenous businesses. So I'm certain I don't necessarily have the solution either, but I wish I had a magic wand. And as I mentioned earlier, we want Canada to be more independent in terms of its manufacturing compared with China, for example. So on that note, I'd like to give you the last word, Mr. Ducharme or Ms. Suter, if you have something to add that would be constructive. Mr. Ducharme, I see you're nodding.
Thank you, Mr. Portillo's. I do believe, again, changing the departmental plans in every executive's professional management plan. Oh, sorry. Oh, am I on mute?
Oh, sorry about that.
Okay.
I apologize, Mr. Ducharme. It seemed to be just a little bit of a signal mix-up with, but yes, please, by all means, continue your answer. Sorry.
Okay. Again, I think I want to go back to where we talked about ensuring that Indigenous procurement targets are in the departmental plans and every executive's professional management plan. I think by having that in place, it's also going to bring the ones that are doing the procurement, they're going to come forward with ideas as well, because then they have to do it. And they're going to make the changes as well, because on these RFPs, there has to be something that's done for them instead of having it set up like it's a weed out system. So I think that's something that can be done without legislation. And I think that would really help to increase the opportunities for our Indigenous businesses.
Thank you, Mr. Descharmes, and thank you, Mr. Paul Hoos. We will now go to Mr. McKinnon for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, and it's a great honor for me to serve at this point in time in this government, which is committed to acting on a commitment to get to 5% Indigenous procurement. It's a tortuous road, admittedly. As I think anyone discovers once encountering the federal government and procurement, it is a very detailed, very heavy at some times, and I fully understand how anyone new to this system or anyone who fears sometimes the level of detail would recoil. And that's why I want to again perhaps finish this round of questioning on a more hopeful note. And I do note, and I want to return to this theme because I think it's so important. And that this issue of trust that we explored. As things currently stand, you have to be registered in we talked about PSAB, and you have to be, unless you're in a treaty organization, the PSAB requires you to register. I think the government's shown all kinds of goodwill in wanting Indigenous organizations and in supporting Indigenous organizations in the establishment of an organization run by Indigenous peoples that would have that level of trust, that would certify businesses as Indigenous owned, who would provide that sort of one-stop shop for procurement. So I do want to collect, and I note that we have not heard from a couple of witnesses on this, but I just want to get your views on the importance of having Indigenous leadership so that businesses can access the procurement system, and the best way of going about that. Who would like to go first? Mr. Descharmes, maybe? We haven't heard from you on this issue.
Oh, okay, sure. I thought you were maybe directing it to someone else because I feel like I've been talking a lot, but I do believe that the trust issue, and it does have to come from Indigenous people. I mean, so many times when we're brought into the fold, we're told what's good for us. And I think for this to be happening, as I said earlier, we've been working at CCAB on this for a number of years, and it is a really big, it's a big project. So it is great when Shannon talks about the groups that are coming together. And I think collectively, we all have so many expertise areas that we can bring together. This does encompass a lot of different things. I mean, we haven't even looked at employment on this for Indigenous businesses with the procurement opportunities, again, increasing it. So I think the trust does have to be there, and it has to be Indigenous led. As Indigenous people, we've been told, again, time after time, what's good for us, what needs to be done. And I think if the government is really committed to this, they will engage with us and have an open dialogue to make sure that this is going to happen and that we are leading the way.
And perhaps just let me ask, are you not sensing that will on the part of the government?
Well, I think in the past, the government has been pretty good at sort of doling out little bits of money here and there. And everyone, we've always been so hungry because we've struggled so much in the past. And again, this is just strictly my feelings, not on behalf of CCAB, but I think quite often the government, that has been a way of sort of controlling, saying we'll give a little bit of money here. Someone speaks a lot, then we'll give them a little bit of money. I think it has to be looked at collectively. And I do believe that our Indigenous groups are working together, as Shannon has mentioned as well. These Indigenous-led organizations are coming together because we do realize that we need to do it for ourselves because we can't rely on anyone but ourselves to get this done.
Anyone else want to comment on that?
Well, I can jump in here. I think it's really important that it be Indigenous-led. I think that's a given. I think that's the only way that we're going to go. Government keeps on talking about devolving services to Indigenous without the resources. So we've got to all work together on proper planning. I think that there's a service function to an Indigenous organization. If we have mandatory targets, then those line managers and those ministers are going to make sure that their teams are putting into place the services, the processes, and the supports necessary to meet those targets. They'll follow after you have the mandatory target, but it's also got to be transparent. So everybody has to know how those mandatory targets are being hit. I like how Philip Descharmes said it should be in their plans that they have to present, but I think it needs to be public. If we made this public, everybody is trying to achieve a target. It's not going to maybe be right away. It will eventually gradually increase, and as the more supports are in place, we just launched a $150 million growth fund. I hope you know it's first time ever that we're going to have access to capital. It was BDC, FCC, EDC all contributing. Yes,
sorry. Just excuse me.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. My understanding is that the interpretation had stopped. If you could ask Mr. Metawababan to slow down and speak a little more clearly, it may be possible the interpreters were unable to follow him.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Mr. Metawaban, I don't know if you heard that, but if you would be able to maybe slow your speech a little bit such that they can follow you, and thus the interpretation will be concise and thorough, and making sure that we get it all done appropriately.
Very sorry.
No worries. Not a problem.
Very passionate when I get into this.
and I get that, and we appreciate that, and it's thankful for doing that. And so I'll let you finish if you would, please.
I'll just say that as long as if we provide mandatory targets rather than just a mandate letter to 3 departments or 2 departments in this case, everybody got a mandate letter. It was going to be posted publicly. Everybody had to hit those targets, or there's going to be consequences. Every department would be putting in the processes to make sure that they hit those targets, and everybody would work together. Like for the first time ever, all of us Indigenous institutions are collaborating and working together because there's a need. So we're doing it. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And Mr. Sinclair, I see you. You're always coming out just at that time when I have to change. If you can, Mr. Sinclair, if you have 15 seconds, I'll give you 15 seconds to quickly answer that.
Okay, I'll just make one quick comment, just a cautionary observation. The devolution of responsibility in delivery of these kinds of programs to the Indigenous community doesn't always solve the problem. It takes much more effort beyond just having those organizations deliver. It does require some metrics and measurements that need to be instilled, where we hold the governments responsible. So it's not just simply a devolving responsibility to an Indigenous agency. It will take more than that.
Thank you, Mr. Sinclair, and I appreciate that. And now, thank you, Mr. McKinnon, for your questions. We have come to the end of your 5 minutes. We will now go to Ms. Vignola for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you so much. I'm listening to you, and I have been for a while now, and it seems to me that all I can imagine is that we have these applications now. You click on them and say, what are your fields of interest? And every week you get some notification that says, oh, listen, there's this new thing. And I hear you talking about the need for being warned in advance, of having a heads up. And it seems to me that there should be some kind of app that to do this work. An app that say I'm in construction, I'm a mason, and I want to be given a heads up when there's a contract of that nature. So it would be wonderful. It would just pop up like that. Wouldn't it be wonderful? Anyway, it's not up to me to decide. I think it's up to you to really say this is how we can better use the resources and the strengths of the First Nations people. It's important to do so. It is critical, in my opinion. So, having said that, how often has the working group Indigenous Business COVID-19 Response Task Force meet since it was set up?
I guess I can answer that. The task force actually ran in 2020, and it ran for.
I beg your pardon, Mr. Chair. I apologize for intervening, and Mr. Metawabin, I apologize as well. I've been informed by our technicians, part of the issue with your sound, sir, is that you may not have your headset selected. Is it possible, and I do apologize for intervening at this late time, but it's one of the issues the interpreters are having. If you could check in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen where the microphone is, there's a small arrow next to it. And by clicking there, you may be able to select the microphone. Alternatively, if you could, if that doesn't work.
I just selected it.
It is selected?
How does this sound now?
I'm just waiting to see if you could continue, and then I'll monitor this with the interpreters. I apologize for the interruption. Thank you.
Okay, so there's a question about a task force. The task force was a temporary gathering, but I was speaking today about a reference group, which is a procurement working group that's working with government. I don't think we were talking about the task force. I don't think, right? Mrs. Vagnola, you raised the task force. I don't know.
Oui, je pense que oui.
Yes, I did. Yes. So I'm trying to find exactly it's a group that that has Indigenous businesses, Inuit, Tepirit, Kanatami as well, and Inuit Women of Canada. So that group, are you aware of that?
Yeah, we were meeting from March until August of last year, at which point we met our mandate, which was to undertake a task force, set up a database, and some other information. That we achieved that, and we discontinued meeting. A portion of that group kept on meeting, but we started new initiatives like the reference group on procurement.
Thank you, Ms. Vignola. And I did give you a little extra time there with the interruption, so I appreciate that. Mr. Green, you have 2.5 minutes and maybe a couple more seconds.
I always appreciate you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Vignola brings up a good point. You know, the PSPC had touted this task force that was supposed to be ongoing work with the Indigenous Business COVID-19 Task Force. And I think the CCAB was involved in that. And so if I can get maybe an expansion on the suggestion the mandate was met, well, what were the outcomes of the mandate? And do you feel like it was a effective and successful way of including Indigenous businesses within the hundreds of billions of dollars of procurement over the course of COVID-19?
Well, I think I was part of that task force.
We could I think it goes through to the CCAB because I think they were also involved as well. Yeah, if we could have Mr. Duchamp answer.
Thank you, Mr. Green. Yes, CCAB was involved with the task force, and the task force mandate was dealing with COVID procurement. We had the businesses that were registered within that directory. They were identified to different ministries in the government. And then once we started going past the current needs of PPE and COVID requirements, my understanding was the task force sort of expanded past that, but we all had our own groups as well as this other collective that was going through it. But when we look at it, when we did the first initial search from that 7 businesses that were publicly identified, it's hard to get results from who has actually won these awards. We've mentioned that earlier. You don't know who gets it within the government. But out of those 7, I believe only 4 of them were within that task force. So the other ones were not part of the task force.
You referenced one example. I think that there was like 32 RFPs that were unsuccessful. Was that from one company, one organization that applied 32 times?
Yes, again, but that was regarding complete federal procurement. It had nothing to do strictly with the PPE. But that one, it was 32 within 1 year. Their business development person spent that. And then they were told, well, what's the sense of applying to the federal government for opportunities when we're investing all this time and money without any feedback?
So you heard me earlier reference the, historic investments that are going to come in a COVID recovery. What feedback would your task force provide this committee, or from your experience in the task force, provide this committee to ensure that there is a greater uptake on that opportunity?
I'll be honest with you, Mr. Green, I was not part of that task force. Again, it was Ms. Bull who was part of that task force, and they did give the recommendations. I think, again, what we're talking about when we're looking at past post-COVID and the opportunities, we do need to find out what those opportunities are going to be so that we can ensure that our businesses are able to fully participate in those post-COVID opportunities.
Mr. Chair, I have one question. I don't know if it's a point of order, but it's a procedural question. When documents like that have been referenced, are we able through our clerk to request those documents be tabled at this committee for the purpose of this study so that we can adequately reflect them and any of the outcomes or recommendations that might come from this study?
Mr. Green, we will check with the clerk and find out if that's possible. Ms. Clerk, any comments?
The committee has in its power to send for documents, which the committee has done in the past. There's nothing that prohibits any member from putting a motion forward, identifying the documents that the committee wishes to receive. In recent times, they've mostly been done from government departments. However, it's not outside the realm of reason, and I've seen examples where documents have even been sought from private individuals or private corporations. So the committee does have a fairly wide-ranging power within its mandate to be able to send for documents either from the government, private individuals, or corporations, associations, etc. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that answer. Mr. Green, is there anything further you had on that?
Well, if we could just maybe, just to be clear about what we're referencing so I can reflect back on it from the Hansard through you, this would have been recommendations that came out of the COVID-19 task force. Is that correct, Mr. Duchamp? That from Ms. Bull, you had mentioned had provided these recommendations in another capacity. Do you have the name of that committee?
Well, I believe the steering or the group that was actually collecting all the data was CanDo. They were the ones that were housing all the information. They were the ones that were creating the reports, and they would come to the members, Shannon and Ms. Bull and other groups with the recommendations. But again, I think there was discussions in there that I'm not privy to, so I would have to go back to Ms. Bull, who was on the committee.
Thank you very much for that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Green. We'll now go to Mr. Macaulay for 5 minutes.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. I'm just wondering how long is this meeting lasting? Because we're way over 2 hours.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Joanne. And we're finishing up now. We're at the last two questioners, so there'll be Mr. Macaulay and then Mr. Kuzmirchuk.
And are we okay? I just want to make sure that our interpreters are okay.
Yes, we're trying to. I'm trying to tighten this up and get this done, and they've been bearing with us this whole day, and we're greatly appreciative of that. Mr. Macaulay, 5 minutes, please.
Great. Mr. Ducharme, your rather disturbing information you provided us about government invoking what I think is probably kind of a shady use of the national security exemption to not give a contract reminds me of TV show Yes Minister with Humphrey Appleby with his comment of all government policy is wrong but frightfully well carried out, and that seems to be the case in this. Have you heard any other similar stories of companies that you believe were perfectly suitable to provide PPE or other COVID-related items to the government, but were shut out for such dubious reasons?
Well, I believe the National Security Act was that they discussed that when the proponent asked the government what was wrong with their bid or where did they lack within their bid. Yeah. And I think most of the ones, when we had the 233 Indigenous businesses that applied to that one RFP that was for Indigenous businesses, that was the standard comment. Originally,
so it wasn't just the one contract. Several purveyors heard that back. Well, we can't tell you because of security.
Yes.
Wow. Did they get any other feedback at all about why? Because I recall, I think it was yourself that mentioned one company had submitted 34 RFPs and heard nothing. I think that was over a several-year basis. Did these companies receive any feedback at all besides national security? Why pricing or anything else? Why they did not get the contracts?
Not to my knowledge, they didn't. What we did is we actually went back and we worked. I contacted the contracting officer to try and find out, and I went to our members that applied to it and said, okay, well, this was based on the price, and that was the only sort of. I tried to educate our suppliers as opposed to the government coming back and telling them where they may have lacked in that opportunity. But they, again, that was just through our own research with the government.
Great. And Ms. Suter had some comments about how the energy industry, especially in Alberta, had very good systems set up to deliver contracts and businesses. Do you have any similar industries that you could point out as, gold standard bearers that the government could actually contact and learn from on better able to deliver contracts to Indigenous businesses?
Is that for Ms. Suter or myself?
For yourself, and then I can pop over to Ms. Suter. I just have limited time. I know she's answered already.
Sure. I think as I talked about supply chains, we have 82 corporations that have joined us. We had an event last week with Deloitte, who is one of our newest Aboriginal procurement champions, and they actually told us that they have met their 5% target, which I think is quite interesting for a new company that's starting the journey with Indigenous procurement. We also had Suncor on there, who has over 10% of their spend with Indigenous businesses. So I think it's happening, but I think it's happening from the leadership on these groups and the commitment that they are making to realizing that this is going to help the overall Indigenous economy and Canada as a whole as well.
Yeah. Do you find that Indigenous businesses are just given up, refusing, or perhaps refusing to even bid on things, and are focusing on a Suncor or other companies that have better systems set up?
I think they are going around and they are shopping to see what the opportunities are. We look at some companies that were, especially in Saskatchewan. I mean, Cameco used to do a lot of procuring. In the last few years, I think it's went down a little bit. So we have looked at these businesses now that are looking to expand. We have one company from Saskatchewan that's partnered with an Indigenous company here in Ontario. So I think within the federal government, there are some that have given up. But I think Indigenous businesses, I mean, as Indigenous people, we are resilient. We've had the doors slammed in our face so many times that we're not going to give up.
How are these other companies getting the word out about Deloitte, or these other companies getting the word out that there are contracts to bid on?
Well, not to take too much credit, but I think within our program where we do have this, I mean, we have this Aboriginal Procurement Marketplace. It's an enhanced LinkedIn feature. So when these champions come to us with opportunities, we reach out to our members. In an ideal world, we would open it up to all Indigenous businesses, but as an association, we do require on membership. Yeah. So I think we've worked together quite closely with Corporate Canada on increasing opportunities.
Okay, Mr. Chair, how much time do I have?
Mr. McCauley, you have 4 seconds. So
I'll just say thanks to the witnesses.
Thank you very much, and thank you for that. And now we will go to our last round, or last question. And I do have Mr. Kazmierczuk down, but I do not see Mr. Kazmierczuk here. Oh, Mr. Drouin. Okay, but we will refer to Mr. Drouin for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'll just take this opportunity. I think the questions we've gone around and round, and you have provided so much material for us to work with. And I'll make this offer as well. We have had this opportunity to chat at this committee a few years back, as Mr. McCauley had mentioned, as we are both old people on this committee, just him, not me. But I want to thank you for coming on this committee. All of you have provided some good material, and do reach out to us outside of committee when there's issues that arise. I know we have the Parliamentary Secretary for Public Service. I know he can be helpful, and we can all be helpful in navigating the system when it's not working. So thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Drouin. I appreciate that. And with that, I really do want to state that I found this extremely compelling, and the witnesses were just so you had me so much into it. I really appreciate the conversation, and in many ways, I allowed things to go probably longer than I have in our meetings in the past a couple of times, because you were so riveting to hear your responses and the comments you had. So I really do appreciate that. Ms. Suter, thank you very much for attending. Mr. Sinclair, thank you. And I apologize that it seemed to be that always was you that I was cutting off when the times came up. It worked that way. Mr. Descharmes, thank you very much for your comments and your thoroughness. And also Mr. Matawattabin for your comments. And I know, it's 8 o'clock in Ottawa. It's 6 o'clock here where I am in Saskatchewan, but I believe it's probably 9, closer to 10 for you. And so I appreciate you all being there. So I would like to thank the witnesses. I also would like to thank the interpreters who have stuck with us this whole time, but the ins and outs of today's meeting and just the challenges we've had with the votes, et cetera. So with that said, I'd like to thank everybody for your staying with us today, and I declare the meeting adjourned.